Keep your blaster handy, the West is a dangerous place. Fight to survive as men turn to monsters and the dead rise on the Wild West Exodus Hub at beastsofwar.com. Venture into the dangerous dungeons of myth as a mighty hero and stand against the darkness. Visit the Myth Hub on beastsofwar.com and begin your story.
Hi guys, and welcome to Mechanicus Week, the Beasts of War unofficial guide to all things Mechanicus. I'm joined by AJ, our resident 40K expert. AJ, we're going to be looking at Mechanicus. Two books
indeed, yes. So we have the Cult Mechanicus and the Scutari as well. These are essentially the same faction. They're essentially the same army, but they actually fall under two separate factions.
Yeah.
So we have the Cult Mechanicus and the Scutari. Now, they are the same army, and they all fall under the armies of the Imperium. Whenever you're looking at in terms of allies and things like that there within the game.
Yeah.
And generally, they are part of that kind of wider faction. But in terms of books, they're divided up into two separate ones, although they work very well together.
Yeah.
And can work separately as well.
Well, this week we're going to be looking at all sorts of the details of this. As well as these public shows. Remember, we're also doing additional backstage shows for backstages where we're going to be looking in even more detail at particular units and characters and stuff like that. So if you're interested, remember you can head on over to beastsofwar.com. We even have a free trial that you can take and get involved in all of the additional content that we're going to be putting out this week. AJ, to kick off, tell me about the origins of Mechanicus.
Well, the Mechanicus, they originate from way back in the very early ages of the history of the Imperium.
Yeah.
Right back from the dark ages of technology. Back then, in our future, but back then the Imperium based all of its technology around the standard template construction system, which was kind of like a series of machines that you fed in what you wanted into it, and then it produced a kind of blueprint for a vehicle or a machine or something that would fit your needs.
So to put this into context, the kind of the timeline of the 40K story is was it the Age of Enlightenment or something, or there was the Age of Technology.
It was the Dark Ages of technology, so that was kind of the time when the Imperium. Sorry, it wasn't the Imperium then, but when humanity was expanding, going out into the far reaches of space. Yeah. And then it all sort of collapsed in on itself.
So during that period, they were creating their own technology. They created artificial intelligence, and these standard template constructs were almost like data files that wherever you were as part of that expansion, if you needed equipment, these files, basically, you plug them into manufacturing rooms or whatever, and they created this equipment.
And they produced it for you.
But at some point, humanity lost the ability to thoroughly understand the technology that they had created. So when we've reached this point of the Mechanicus, it's almost religious. Rather than a deep understanding of intellectual or of artificial intelligence, they worship it almost as a spirit. The understanding's gone.
They treat them almost as relics. It's very much an archaeological kind of exploration that they now have to undertake to create to find new things that are new to the Imperium but have previously been used and lost. Technology isn't in an innovative place. It's very much you're trying to replicate what has gone before, and technology is getting consistently worse.
So they're more assimilators than innovators in that sense. So a lot of the I suppose the armor that we see within the 40K universe, or within the Imperium anyway, a lot of that is now militarized versions of what might have been even kind of civilian or exploration equipment, mining equipment, farming equipment, and stuff in the past. So a big part of what happens with the Mechanicus is that they're always seeking out these STCs, these standard template constructs and things like that. So if there's even a whisper of that something like this might be out there, these are the guys that are going out to get it. And then I'm sure they're always looking for the militarization. What is the military opportunities for any of this technology that they pull together?
Very much so. In fact, within the book, the Skitarii book, there's a unit called the Dune Crawler. And the Dune Crawler was actually originally a platform that the tech priests would have used on Mars to traverse the kind of...
I think we have a picture of a Dune Crawler here, indeed, so we can actually show you. So there's the Dune Crawler.
When they originally designed this, it was to transport materials and tech priests and things across the kind of massive barren expanses of Mars. However, eventually they then weaponized it and turned it into a military vehicle. Yeah, that's something that their armies could use.
There are some other kind of key phrases that you will hear come up whenever people are talking about the Mechanicus and stuff. What is the schism?
The schism was very much that happened whenever you had the Imperium sort of forming. Yeah. And the Mars and Terra kind of split in kind of their ideology.
So the Mechanicus, their kind of head office, their headquarters per se is on Mars, isn't it? So is it almost because like they've almost in some way separated from the Imperium, that they're there with it but separate from it at the same instance?
There's kind of within the Mechanicus there's kind of different beliefs about what the Omnissiah is. There are those that believe that the Omnissiah is the Emperor, obviously who rules over the whole of the Imperium. And then there's this other kind of belief that the Machine God is its own entity. And in fact, there's
so maybe a piece of super artificial intelligence. Is that kind of thing?
Well, there's even the link with the Khitan, the one that lives, the Void Dragon that they keep locked away within Mars.
Again, for anybody that's wondering what Khitan are, the Khitan are very closely linked to the Necrons, and they're kind of like, I don't know, like machine gods almost, aren't they? Or
they are essentially, they call them the Star Gods. Yeah. They're almost like demigods in their own right. And they kind of exist in their own kind of world. They led the Necrons to become what they were, the machines.
So the schism is that kind of separation or that point where the Mechanicus start to almost stand on their own. What role did they play in the heresy? Because obviously everything that we game now in 40K has its roots based in the Horus heresy, and there's a lot of people gaming in the Horus heresy. A lot of these models and stuff are actually pretty cool for that as well. But what was their role within the Horus heresy? Where did they fit into all of that?
Well, just like the Space Marine legions and even the Imperial Army and the Imperium as a whole, there was a massive divide between those that stayed loyal and those that went with Horus, and eventually they became the Dark Mechanicus. They started investigating things that they shouldn't have been investigating, channeling warp energies into the machines, things like that there. And then eventually, that's where you had the demon engines, the likes of the Mauler Fiends and the Defilers and
because like the Defiler looks like this. We imagine now that the Defiler is effectively a demonized version of the Dune Crawler.
Very, very much so, and you can see that even in the design. I always think that looks like half a Defiler, half a Grant tank from the American forces. So I think it's quite an interesting design, and you can definitely see where that kind of has come from.
So where does Mechanicus fit within the Imperium today? But let's talk politically about it for a little while. It's you've had the schism. There's this separation, how in the narrative of 40K at this point in time did the Mechanicus fit into the Imperium?
Well, I think the Mechanicus are very important in that they produce the material.
Yeah.
So they're very relevant in that respect. There is a serious lack of trust between the two elements. Obviously, the Mechanicus see themselves as far more important.
Yeah.
Because they are in control of all of the material and things like that there. But at the same time, they rely upon the meat sacks, the humans, to essentially feed.
I've been reading a book called Titanicus by Dan Abnett, and I get a real feel. There's some other books up on this. We'll come to this in a second, but you get a real feel from that particular novel that the Mechanicus really do see humanity as meat.
Yeah.
Meat that is ready, that is primed to be enhanced with whatever technology they can throw at it. And at the same time, like the Mechanicus even have their own language. You know, it's like they because they're so machine, they don't need to speak to each other with words, and they struggle with it actually because they forget how to do it.
Yeah.
They have a language called, I think it's binaric. So it's all. It must sound like R2D2. You know? They're chippering away at each other.
Yeah, and I bet that communication is so quick you might not even know that it's happening.
There must be a supreme level of arrogance though within the Mechanicus. And that, I would imagine, definitely breeds a distrust within the meatbags like ourselves, who then have to deal with them, because you know how intellectually superior they are. So they're light years ahead of you in terms of anything you're thinking, any strategy you might come up with.
Well, that's it. I mean, there's a point in the creation of a tech priest or any Mechanicum being that's called the Crux Mechanicus. And that's the point when their body becomes more mechanical than biological. Yeah. So that's kind of more than half of their body is
the tipping point.
It's that tipping point, you know. Essentially, eventually, when you end up being a tech priest dominus or something like that, there you've eventually hit the point where your brain is just a floppy disk. You know, it's all been, you've downloaded all your material onto a floppy disk, and you're now essentially completely mechanical. Mechanical tendrils and you know, kind of octopus type legs and all kinds of things. So it's that point is what they're seeking to achieve. That's perfection to the Mechanicus. Whereas that is quite abhorrent to us. That would be the idea of that is
if somebody's looking to find out obviously more about where the Mechanicus fit into the Imperium, I take it these books are the key opportunity for them.
Very much so. They're if you're looking at the early period of the Mechanicus, the Heresy, Horus Heresy book, Mechanicum's very good.
Yep.
It focuses on Mars and how that split between the Dark Mechanicus and the Mechanicus kind of happened and came about. But Graham McNeil has released a series. It started out as a two-parter, but it ended up as a three-parter. Priests of Mars, Lords of Mars, and then Gods of Mars. Yeah. And they kind of look at an explorator fleet. Probably the biggest thing that the Mechanicus are most keen on doing is finding new technology or rediscovering technology that was lost. And they have explorator fleets that go out and basically do this. And they don't care what they destroy or what they have to, how many Skitarii they go through, or it's all about accumulating that data, finding that new information, and gaining those new things that drive on their war.
Well, looking, we know that the Mechanicus are out there. For example, they seem to have a habit of running into the Necrons.
Very much.
Necrons obviously have this technology, so the Mechanicus do tend to trip over them.
They do want to get their hands on it.
But the Mechanicus, as well as being out there exploring, they have a series of very famous kind of forge worlds that they live on. So I want to open up the books just to talk about some of these the forge worlds that they exist on. Let me see where they are. Oh. So here we have Mars with its classic red color scheme. We're only going to pick out a few, but clearly Mars is obviously the first one we're going to have to talk about.
Definitely. And one of my favorite parts of the fluff with the Skitarii is the fact that when you become a Skitarii, you have to remove the bottom part of your legs, and that's like the first
step towards that cybernetic transformation. Yeah.
You know, and I always think that's very Monty Python-esque. You know, well, we have to take your legs off. That's, you know. So I think that's kind of like the first step, and I think that's quite interesting because the fluff behind that is that when humanity first got to Mars, the ground was so warm that when they were traveling across the deserts, their limbs were worn away, and that's why they needed
all of these lower appendages are all basically just replaced.
Replaced. You know, right off, they just whip off your legs, you know, off they come. The other thing is that they actually remove your eyelids as well.
Yeah.
They want you to be able to see and intake knowledge at all times, you know, so that's another thing they do. And because they've already lobotomized you, you're quite happy to go along with it as well, you know. But yeah, Mars is the original.
Is like some of the Forge Worlds are known for particular machines and things like that develop it. Is Mars pretty much a hub for everything that, or what do they do?
Very much so. Most of the technologies that you can get elsewhere in the Imperium, you can find on Mars. It's particularly well known for its Baneblades and things like that there, but it's kind of the original patterns. And then a lot of the other Forge Worlds have kind of tweaked and put their own little stamp on it and things like that there. But generally it's the original. Generally it's considered to produce the best equipment. If you've got Mars equipment, you're generally...
Here we have another one. This is Styges 8. I think this is a particular favorite of yours, isn't it?
It is indeed, so, yeah.
What do we know about these guys? Firstly, the color scheme's fairly intricate on these guys. So,
and their color scheme is quite similar to Mars as well. They kept that Martian red. Although they have been known to play around with Xeno technology a little bit, they've got into trouble with the Inquisition the odd time because of that. Again, feeding that mistrust of the Mechanicus because they're always tinkering with things they shouldn't be tinkering with. But I particularly like this Forge World because it produces it's best known for producing the Imperial Guard Leman Russ Vanquisher.
That's the Leman Russ with the long barrel.
It's the long barrel kind of anti-tank. And it's just always been one of my favorite tanks ever since Forge World kind of released it in the late 90s. And I just thought that was a great tank.
I've picked a favorite as well. So what do you check these guys out? So this is Metallica. Now, other than the fact that it is as rock and roll as you're likely to get, I absolutely love the color scheme for this particular Forge World. Is there anything what can you tell us about Metallica itself as a Forge World?
Well, Metallica is entirely made of metal. The surface is entirely metal, so minerally it's very rich. And you can tell through the kind of very bright metal that they have. They have a lot of access to that material. The other thing they're quite well known for their Titan Legion. Which was on Armageddon. And I can't remember the name of the Princeps now. But he actually sacrificed his own machine to destroy one of the orc rocks that was invading the planet. I believe they're called the Iron Skulls, which is very poignant.
It's very, very metal, isn't it?
Very metal, yeah. But the color scheme as well, I think, is a fantastic color scheme, and it's almost like a complete opposite of Mars. So it's almost a reverse.
And what do we know about Ryza? These guys here.
It's an interesting Forge World because it's perpetually under attack. It's just always it's always under attacks. The orcs are just always kind of fighting away at them and chaos as well. They are most well known throughout the Imperium for producing plasma weaponry.
Yeah.
All types of plasma weaponry, from the smallest pistol right up to the kind of the storm blade and things like that with the large plasma blast guns. If you were allying in a guard army, it would be kind of very apt if you included as much plasma toting veterans as you could physically fit in, you know.
Well, talking about the Forge Worlds, there is in the book itself a very interesting map. Now, is it in this book?
Yeah,
So,
it's page 12, I think.
there we go.
There we are.
Right. We did get a load of this. So, here we have the map of the galaxy. Basically, this is the whole system. Now, if I zoom in here, you can see how the Forge Worlds all basically are at their densest near Terra and Mars as they work out, and then they start to become a little more dispersed as they work their way out from that. Now, it's probably worth mentioning, just so as you can get your bearings on this, that let me just see what we've got. So Mars and Terra are here. Macragge is there, a very famous planet where the Ultramarines were almost devastated by the Tyranid fleet that came in. You have the Tau Empire at this point, and then up here you have the ultimate sector, and right out here you have Triplex Foul, which is probably the remotest Forge World you're ever likely to find. And if you're interested, Metallica is just down here, just further back from Macragge. So I would imagine that Metallica at some point are going to meet their Tyranid doom potentially.
You can hear them 3 sectors away.
Yeah. So the interesting thing about the Forge Worlds themselves is, because there's so many of them, there is the real opportunity to game in the gaps here, where you can create your own Forge World, create your own backstory, and there just seems to be a lot of opportunities there to create something that's truly your own.
Very much so, yeah.
Now, they tend to congregate around worlds, but you'd also mentioned them being out in fleets.
Yeah.
So if somebody didn't want to particularly tie their Mechanicus to a particular world, there's no reason why that particular group of Mechanicus couldn't be in fleet mode at that point out.
No, definitely
not. At some point of an exploration.
I mean, there's the explorator fleets, which would be going out and looking for that new technology, but there would also be the ones that are just kind of looking after the transport of the Titans, the Titanicus legions. There's all kinds of anything that logistical. They're also still having to do all that kind of bulk conveyance and all that kind of stuff, which still leaves access for protecting the Titan legions. You mentioned Titanicus.
Yep.
There's quite a good chapter in that goes into the Skitarii versus the evil or bad, the dark Mechanicus Skitarii, and that is probably one of the most ferocious battles that you can have in 40K, because they're just these lobotomized killing machines. And when you throw them together, it's just like rock'em sock'em robots.
Well, let's talk hobby for a little bit, right? Because we're having a look at color schemes. Now we've already seen the Mars color scheme. It's you have an opportunity for dry brushing a lot of metals, and then you're doing your reds and things. I particularly like the Lucius color scheme. It's it in particular, I think, is a very, very interesting color scheme. If somebody wanted to take these and make kind of like a dark Mechanicus, then just play them with Mechanicus rules, but obviously don't ally them with the Imperium.
Maybe Trader Guard. Or...
There's a load of opportunities there to take this and to put together a kind of a dark Mechanicus army, isn't there?
Yeah. Even when you look at the style of the armor, it wouldn't be that much of a stretch to kind of, I think one of the Chaos Gods that I think would be most interesting to do it with would be the likes of the Nurgle, and have it kind of dripping with eyes and pustules and tentacles, because it wouldn't need that much to kind of get
Yeah,
that
you wouldn't
far,
need components. You could use green stuff
just
and
green stuff it in
and wires and cables and
lots
stuff like
lots
that.
of rust. And,
Yeah.
it'd be quite a nice, and I think it would just look great.
We've also got Greya here. And then finally, we've had a look at these two. Now, I want to open up the other book, the Cult Mechanicus book, and have a quick look at that to try and see the difference in the actual models themselves. So in the Cult Mechanicus, again, they're from the same Forge Worlds as well. So it's just a whole different set of models from the same Forge World. So here we have Mars. The interesting thing for me here, though, is, as you can see on these guys here, they've got this kind of blue energy. That is flesh, or at least dead, kind of artificially kept alive flesh. But they have this kind of blue, almost like electric that's running through them.
The energy is very much coursing through them. Their veins are almost replaced with kind of microfilament.
Yeah.
And they just use that energy, and they actually channel it to attack their foes and also to power their weapons as well.
So there's an Electro Priest there in artwork, and you can see that it's all energy and power that's running through that. And we also have some painted guys there, so as you can see just how it works out whenever you actually start to paint them up.
They're actually very, very cool models. They've been around in the sort of background of 40K right from the very beginning. I think they had rules in way back in 2nd edition, but it's nice to start to see these units come to life, and with the technology and model making that we have now, we're able to see these models that weren't previously available to us.
So if you do manage to pick up the second book, which is the Cult Mechanicus, there's Lucius there on that page. You get all of those same kind of color schemes, but transferred across into the other units that are available. I want to have a quick look at some of the actual painted models themselves to see what they're like when they're painted up. I absolutely love this color scheme here. So let's just go in a bit closer on that. Who are these guys?
That's the Forge World of Ryza or Riza. They're orange. That's the color scheme of their forge. And on paper, whenever you see it in the drawings, it looks a bit too brash and a bit too bright. But then whenever you actually see the models painted up in the color scheme, I think it just looks great.
So, models-wise, let's go through some of the models that are out now for the Mechanicus. So, kicking off, we have, what have we got here?
These are these are actually the Skitarii Rangers. Although with the kit that you buy with that box set, you get the Rangers and the option for the Vanguard as well.
Yeah.
Again, they're great models. It's very much the only real difference is the arms, the gun, and the head option. Personally, I think the hooded look is fantastic and very much kind of reminiscent of old John Blanche kind of artwork and things like that. There, I think it looks great. But the Vanguard, they have a much more kind of Romanesque feel to them as well, and I think the two kind of work very well for this Skitarii. Yeah.
What else have we got there?
We also have the Onega Junewalker, which we've seen a little bit earlier on. This is again a really, really cool unit. I do think it has that kind of Grant or Lee type high profile front and side mounted gun, but then just on a wicked awesome legs, a lot of people, some people have liked it, some people don't like it. I personally think it really fits in that Adeptus Mechanicus kind of look. And I always think as well, whenever you see a model for the first time and it's something different to what you're kind of expecting, it always kind of takes you a bit by surprise. But then when the community get hold of it and you start to see conversions
other
and alterations, other paint schemes, you go, wow, actually, I think that's pretty cool, And that's one of the things that I get the most joy out of whenever I'm just killing some time on the net, whenever looking around and seeing on Warseer and different places like that there, and probably Beast of War hopefully soon as well. Different kind of conversions that people have come up with.
What else have we got there?
We've also got the probably the most controversial unit, the Castellan robots. Again, a great unit. First time I think the Imperium have actually had something like a monstrous creature.
Yeah.
So it's really, really cool to see that from the Imperium point of view. A great bit of fluff is, or a great bit of the background of the Mechanicus is that they're not allowed to have artificial intelligence. They had it, but again, things got a wee bit iffy, and it all started to turn into a bit of a mess, and we had a Terminator situation going on where Chaos had infected it and turned it bad, and so it was just banned. So in actual fact, these guys are almost like extreme Robocops. Yeah. They're almost like that Robocop 2. You know the bad guy in that? It's almost like that, where they've fed a little bit of humanity into them. Yeah. But just the barest amount of.
So what's the difference really between pure artificial intelligence and machine spirit then within 40K? I know it's quite a blurry, thing.
It's a very kind of grey area, isn't it? The machine spirit is very much like. I think the way I get the impression of it is it's kind of a catch-all for technology they don't fully understand. Yeah. The machine spirit's kind of looking after that. Yeah. Because as we said, they've lost that technology and they don't fully understand what they're playing around with.
Is it in its simplest terms a case of machine spirit, good AI, bad AI?
I think there is very much a feeling of that there. But all of the technology that the Mechanicus use has to be at some point controlled. Yes. You know, so you've got the tech priest that comes with the Castellans, and he is still very much in control of them. And
right, so they're not completely autonomous.
They're not completely autonomous. He's feeding in what's called protocols to them, and they're kind of adapted. But I've grown to like them. When I first saw them, I was kind of like, oh, they look a bit like diver suits. Yeah. But I've grown to kind of like them. I think, again, once the community got hold of them, I could start to see different poses and shapes and things that I started to really enjoy. Yeah.
They were models, I've got to say, whenever I first saw them, I looked at them and I thought, yeah, it's a strange design decision. It doesn't fit with, on first look, with what I had seen before within the Imperium. Where the Imperium has always been such square edges and stuff like that, there to see what is basically a 60s robot made me go, whoa, that's danger, Will Robinson, danger. It was, but it's one of those things, if it takes you, it takes you. If it doesn't take you, do you know what? The fact that the unit is there. There's plenty of other things that you can either do, repurpose, or proxy in for that if you wanted to go with a slightly different style of it.
And the tech priest data smith that comes with him is just sensational. Yeah, he's almost just worth buying. Yeah, I just want him in my Imperial Guard army for myself.
Now this particular unit that's coming up, I'm a really big fan of. Well, what are these?
These are the Cataphren. This unit is the breachers, but there's also the destroyers as well. The destroyers are the heavily armed ones. Yeah. These are much more heavy armored, and they carry some pretty awesome array of weaponry. I was so excited for these models, again because of Titanicus. Yeah. They're featured quite heavily in Titanicus, and I just think they're so quintessentially 40K. They just scream 40K, and servitors. Everyone loves a servitor. A lobotomized servitor.
I particularly love the tracks and stuff like that on these guys. It's they do have that. Is it the Lord of Death type? That big chaos engine look, but these look good.
Yeah, the Lord of Skulls.
Yes, the Lord of Skulls. These ones actually really do. look purposeful to me.
Yeah.
Right, that's a selection of some of the models. During the course of this week, we'll be looking at all the models in more detail. Now, we have the 2 books, okay? This is all going to come down to, it's all very well as looking at color schemes and bits and pieces of prettiness, and we will be coming back to narrative throughout this week, because I really want to explore this faction of Mechanicus from a hobby perspective. It's all very well saying, this is a killer list, but if you're not enjoying it and you're not getting into the hobby of it and you're not able to make it yours, you're not going to stick with it, really.
No.
How do these guys make war?
They make. Sorry,
You will find the words.
I'm just so excited about these books. The whole idea behind the Mechanicus way of making war is just to completely, relentlessly beat down your opponent. They don't. The tech priests aren't worried about how many units of Skitarii they go through. They're not worried about how many battle servitors they have to, send in wave after wave. They just want to beat down their opponent, and in doing so, by sending in those wave after wave, they're learning all the time. Yeah, they're learning about how the enemy moves, about their technology. They're feeding off all of that data and collecting all of that data, because that's what they really enjoy and really get their kicks out of, get their teeth into. There's a million kind of bureaucrats back on the Forge World, just taking in all that information, typing it up, and turning it into binaric code, and just feeding off all of that.
So what is their play style then? Let's start getting into the rules a little bit
Cool.
now. So most armies, you start to find their play style when in the likes of the warlord traits and the force organization charts and things like that. Now, the whole method of developing a force with these guys is quite different from your standard force organization chart. For example, they don't have HQ units.
No, only the Cult Mechanicus has an HQ choice. Yeah. The Skitarii actually don't have one. The background to that is that their commanders are in the fleet. Yeah. And they send all of the information, all of the doctrines down to Earth via actually the Dune Walkers. Yeah. The Dune Crawlers. They feed all the information out to the Skitarii units, and that's why they kind of prosecute their wars. Yeah. But the great thing is that the rules mimic their way of war very, very accurately. Yeah. For example, the Skitarii units, they have.
Let's see where their rules are. Yeah. So if we can skip through to them.
The Skitarii units actually have Relentless. Yeah. Which is a great rule. You can rapid fire and charge at the same time. So they feed into those kind of that way of making war very, very well.
So let me just bring this up here. Yeah. So there we have the Skitarii war gear list. In terms of, if we go further back, we can just go to that force organization chart. So on this one, can you describe what we're seeing there?
Yeah, so you can see right away that it's very similar to the original combined arms detachment, which is the kind of standard force organization chart. The most glaring difference is there's usually an HQ or a couple of HQs here.
Which, if I bring in very quickly the Cult Mechanicus, we can see that the force organization chart is more familiar anyway. Yeah. 1 HQ, 2 troops, and then you have the additional troops, elites, and heavy support, along with any fortifications that they might take. It seems that in the Skitarii, you could be quite troop heavy in this if you want to be.
Very much, and also with the Cult Mechanicus as well. They are very troop centric. What's great is that their troop choices are very good. Yeah. They are elite troops in themselves. Your detachments fit that style of play very, very well. What I love about the Skitarii one in particular is that at low point cost games, you've got a really, really simple way of getting right into it. You don't need that HQ. So once you've bought one box of Skitarii, you've already got enough models to do an army.
Really?
Because
Can you fill your 2 trip choices with one box?
Yeah.
Really?
That one box will give you 5 Rangers, 5 Vanguard, or any combination of those.
Yeah.
And that is essentially enough for even if you wanted to stick it into your existing army.
Yeah.
You could just with one box.
Well, that's one of the interesting things about this is if we talk about allies, for example, and how existing players of 40K, that have an existing Imperial army, if there's every opportunity for them to bring the Mechanicus into their own force. So, harking back to Titanicus, there's the part in Titanicus where the local guard unit is getting devastated by chaos. They really are getting their butts handed to them. And then there's this whole moment where the Skitarii all arrive and the Titan legions arrive with all this pomp and glory and stuff. You can almost imagine bringing Skitarii into your Imperial Guard list. So you have a guard list. These guys here, you can bring them in via the allies, and you don't need to bring an HQ in. You can just bring in 2 units of troops.
Just straight in with the 2 units of troops.
And you're there. So if you were going to be playing like narrative games, this is what I'm most interested in. Is it doesn't have to be a Skitarii army on its own. If you've got want to do some narrative games where you're trying to hunt down and protect an STC or some kind of arcane technology that they're interested in, you can have 1-2 squads. Well, you'll have 2 squads of Skitarii in there. That the rest of the field, whether they be the Astartes, the Space Marines, or the Imperial Guard, they have to blow a channel through to get them in there, and then protect them while they get the stuff and get it out. And they're, as we will find out during the week, they're no weaklings on their own either. These guys when they come to fight. In terms of the Mechanicus could be basically attached to anything in the Imperium. From the Allies list, we know that they act as Imperial armies. What does that mean specifically from an Allies perspective?
Well, particularly with 7th edition allies have changed quite a bit. It used to be that every faction was kind of divided up into its own sort of compartment, whereas now the armies of the Imperium have all been sort of put together, which means that they are all battle brothers with other armies of the Imperium, which is, for an Imperial player, fantastic, because you're open to include any of those armies, whether it's Sisters of Battle, the Adeptus Mechanicus, any of the Astartes.
And being battle brothers, what does that enable them to do?
What that allows them to do is they can share transports. If you have a unit of Imperial Guard in a Chimera and the Guard are killed but the Chimera is still alive, well, you can throw your Skitarii in it, which is great. Or if you have a Space Marine captain and you want to put him in with a unit of the infiltrators, well, you can just join them all up, which is great because it just gives you complete flexibility. Because, and again, it fits the background, because why wouldn't they?
So there's so much more opportunity to find synergies between these, and there's a lot of opportunity to find synergies, obviously, then between the likes of the Mechanicus soldier or the Mechanicus armies and anything that you're already running on the Imperium.
Definitely. In
terms of things like warlord traits and stuff, do they have those? And
each codex has its own warlord traits. The Skitarii ones.
I'll just bring up the warlord's traits table there. So, what kinds of warlord traits do these guys have, and what kind of difference does it make on the play style?
Again, the warlord traits, generally you find the ones in the codex most of the time aren't as strong as the ones in the rulebook. Particularly the strategy traits, strategic traits in the rulebook are very, very strong. But there are a few nice ones. The Skitarii obviously suffer from the fact that their warlords are just the commanders within their units.
Yeah.
So, depending on which unit you choose, they're generally quite low toughness and easy to kind of pick off. But there are a few nice ones. For example, your number 1, your warlord has the Eternal Warrior special rule. It's certainly not going to be game winning.
Yeah.
Because you only have a 2-win model, but it stops that model from being instant killed, which otherwise it would be, because it's toughness 3, anything from strength 6, and with the prevalence of toughness or strength 7 and above weapons nowadays, that might keep him alive just that little turn longer. Who knows? It could do any kind of thing.
Yeah.
So generally, the ones in the Skitarii book aren't particularly strong. They're not bad, but they're not particularly strong.
Yeah, that's the Cult Mechanicus
I've gone the wrong
book,
one. Oh, right, my mistake.
That's your Skitarii there.
Oh, my mistake.
But in terms of, we'll be coming to warlord traits specifically whenever we actually get deeper into the week. But to round this video out, okay, before we move on to the XLBS version of the show, where we're going to start looking at specifics in the HQ section, what are the key kind of things to watch for in terms of, I don't know, the different types of weapon and stuff like that are more AdMech than what you would see elsewhere? There's a lot of kind of pretty custom stuff in these books.
There's some really cool things. The probably one of my favorite special weapons is the arc rifle.
Yeah.
Or the arc series of weapons. They are all haywire, which is a great rule on a 1. It's no effect. 2 to 5 is a glancing hit.
Yeah.
And 6 is a penetrating hit. And that's just a great way, because of hull points and the way hull points work with vehicles now almost being wounds. That just means that you have a much better way of cycling through those hull points and taking down those bigger vehicles, particularly the likes of the knights.
Yeah.
Which have become so prevalent. If you've got 5, 6, up to 12 hull points with the likes of the Baneblades and things like that there, you need something that's going to cycle through those glancing hits very, very quickly. You don't really have time in 40k to kind of rely on those las cannons getting the lucky shot anymore. So they're a great weapon. Probably one of my favorite rules within the 2 books is the Luminogen special rule, and it's on the Phosphor series of weapons.
Yeah.
And basically what it does is it minuses your cover save if you take a hit, if you take an unsaved wound or hull point from a Luminogen weapon, that minuses your cover save for the turn by 1.
Yeah. So
it's a really good way of kind of digging those units out of cover, and it's quite easily accessible within the army.
Yeah.
They've also, we'll talk a wee bit more about it in the backstage video, but they've also introduced some of the Horus Heresy rules for weapons into the Mechanicus books.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting, because obviously if anyone was going to have that technology,
it's going to be the Mechanicus.
It would be the Mechanicus.
Yeah.
So it's really nice to see that kind of filtering across,
Well, guys, there's a background to the Mechanicus. Like I said, this week we're going to be exploring the Mechanicus. We're going to be looking at the hobby aspects of it. We're going to be looking in depth at the units and what they do and what we can do with them strategically. But primarily, we just want to explore this and create a really good guide to the Mechanicus, so that if you decide you want to get stuck into these guys either as a primary army or as a detachment that you want to add to an existing army that you already have, you should be able to watch this and get stuck right in. Okay, come on over to beastsofwar.com, where on the backstage we have an XLBS, that's an extra long backstage version, so it's a whole additional show where we're going to be exploring the HQ units, I believe,
we are indeed,
in quite some depth. So if you fancy that, come on across to Beasts of War, and we will see you there. AJ, thank you, mate.
Thank you.
And we will see you guys very shortly. I'm starting to feel my Doctrinus for my early stage of the game, okay? I don't even know why they bothered writing the first 2, to be honest. So I'm going to go with that one.
Well, the downside is that you can only choose 1 per turn. So
and you can't
reuse it. So once it's gone, it's gone. So essentially what you have is, if you follow the kind of chart, generally if you follow the chart that way,
Well, let me just bring that up on screen. So, what you're suggesting is kind of
would start with the
going
alpha.
This direction here.
Yeah.
That's interesting, actually. So, like an inverted U shape. So you're starting with your alpha, you're working your way back up, and then as you.
In a world controlled by massive corporations, a steady aim and split-second decisions are needed for your Megacon to complete its goals. Begin your missions at the Mercs Hub on beastsofwar.com. Progress comes to a world of magic as science and the arcane combine to make marvels. Meet steampunk inventors and orc mystics at the Volsung Hub on beastsofwar.com.